And I remember a few years ago I was doing an interview with NPR. And the interviewer said, Dr. Carson, I noticed that you don't talk about race very often. Why is that? And I said, it's because I'm a neurosurgeon. And she looked at me quite quizzically. What the heck is that got to do with it? But she didn't say that, but I could tell from her eyes that's what she was saying. I said, you see, when I take a patient to the operating room, and I cut the scalp and peel it down, and I take off the bone, and I open the dura, I'm operating on the thing that makes that person who they are. It's not the cover that makes them who they are. It's the brain that makes them who they are. And when you can begin to see into the distance, you can see beyond the superficial. That's when problems begin to be resolved. One of the wonderful things, I don't know how many of you are students of American history. If you go back and you look at the writings of Sam Adams, John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington's memoirs, you see that these were all people who had a vision of what a nation could be if, in fact, the power of that nation was vested in the people, not in some ruler, not in some gigantic government. And it's really very inspirational when you look at what they were thinking, and particularly you go back and read the proceedings of the Congressional Convention, the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And look at what the kinds of things that they were thinking of as they put the Constitution together. And they basically were trying to assure that we would have a smooth functioning government, looking at all the propensities of people to grab power, to grab wealth, to grab everything. They tried to design a system that would still function in the face of people doing those kinds of things. Now, the one thing that they did not take into account, I've been studying this quite a bit, they assume that with the type of government that we put forward, which is what's called a Republican type government, it has nothing to do with Democrats and Republicans, it talks about a representative government, they did not take into account that people wouldn't just go and represent, their community and then come back home. People would become addicted to power, that they would never want to give it up, that they would want to keep going back and back and back and back and make it into sort of a lifetime career. They did not anticipate that. And of course, that creates the fourth branch of government, which are special interest groups. You wouldn't empower special interest groups if you didn't have people who are always trying to go back and always trying to get reelected. And that, of course, has distorted the whole thing, because instead of looking at the big picture, special interest groups, that's why they call them special interest groups. They're looking at their special interest. They don't really care what happens to everybody else. And that's a problem that at some point hopefully can be addressed. Maybe some of the bright young minds in this room might be able to come up with a mechanism whereby we can address those kinds of things. But it is so important, particularly during your educational phase, to avail yourself of the enormous amount of information that is available about the history not only of our nation, but of all nations and the history of the world. And people who are well versed in what has happened when you've done this, and it always seems to happen when you do this, and it's not a good thing, they learn how not to do this. But people who don't know that, they keep doing the same silly stuff over and over again, making the same mistakes, and of course having the same result. So my takeaway point, learn from the past, learn from your life, learn from the life of people around you, and you'll go much further, much faster, I can guarantee it. Thank you. Now I'll take some questions. Yes?
Do you think when you performed the operation on the Siamese twins, I'm sorry. Do you think if, when you performed the operation with separating the Siamese twins, if it wouldn't have been a success, that would have had a negative effect on your career?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Well, it's very interesting because, they say everybody gets 15 minutes of fame during your life. Well, my first 15 minutes of fame came with doing hemispherectomies, an operation in which you take out half of the brain to stop intractable seizures. And I got a lot of national press about that and stories and stuff. And it was all nice and well. And then my second 15 minutes of fame came with putting a shunt into an intrauterine twin, a twin that was still in the mother's womb. The head was growing very, very rapidly and threatening not only that twin's life, but the other twin, who was normal. And so, we put a shunt into the baby while it was still in the mother's womb and saved not only the hydrocephalic baby, the other one as well. And, that was my second 15 minutes of fame. And I said to my wife, if there's a third 15 minutes of fame, our lives will change. So it wasn't just the fact that the Siamese twin operation turned out to be successful. It was that those other things had happened. And I know the news media, and they would say, wait a minute, isn't that the same guy who did this? And then the same guy who did this. And then they'd go back and they'd start looking into my background. And they would say, can you believe where this guy came from? And then things would build. But I was wrong about one thing I said, and it'll be a lot of hoopla, and it'll all die down in about 5 years, but it never died down. And it didn't help that I kept doing other ones. But, the fact of the matter is, I think probably if it had not worked out, I would not have had the same kind of career. People do tend to, after a while, embellish and say, wow, this is great. But the fact of the matter is, anybody who can make it through the training program to become a board-certified neurosurgeon in this country, that's a great person. I mean, that is somebody who is incredibly bright and incredibly capable, and placed in the right situation is likely to accomplish great things.